let us speak to Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, because coming up this week, it's likely to be the case that the government will offer Tory rebels a sort of olive branch over foreign aid. Theresa May has been amongst one of the foremost people leading the charge to say that foreign aid should go back up to 0.7 of the GDP of this country, as opposed to going back down to 0.5 and staying there. Alan, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
Is that your understanding that that they're going to cave in on this?
Well, no, I don't believe that's the case, because I think they've called the vote on the assumption they're going to win the vote based on their existing sort of policy position. So I believe there has been an attempt to reach a compromise with people. Basically, they've been looking at, obviously, looking at independent verification of when we get to 0.7%, or rather have the capacity to pay for it again. But I think right now the feeling is the government's going to try and, kind of stiff it out and see what happens later today.
Right. I mean, what I'm reading in the Times this morning is they're suggesting that a sort of compromise might be found, which is that it would not take 4 or 5 years for that to be looked at, and it might go back to 0.7 kind of sooner rather than later.
Well, yeah, I think that's the key thing. The key thing, looking at things like the Office of Budget Responsibility, will they be able to kind of give the prediction in that way? Various other sort of similar kind of ways of kind of stroking backbenchers and reminding them, basically saying, look, we will be in a position shortly where we can return to the 0.7%, and that also leads to, kind of satisfying you that this is not a long-term change, but something rather short-term.
Yes, exactly right. And of course, what's been the main sort of, I suppose, fallout of this whole conversation is that people have started debating again whether or not we should even be giving foreign aid to an awful lot of the places that we do give it to, whether it's 0.5 or 0.7. Maybe we shouldn't be giving it at all.
Well, yeah, I think the interesting part of this discussion is how this tallies with public opinion. So we've seen some rebellions where people haven't rebelled on issues where public opinion is clearly in favour of rebellion. So, for example, on genocide, for example, in Xinjiang province, the general public are perfectly happy to recognise that as genocide, but MPs have moved back that way. This way, it's very interesting to see that the MPs are out of step with public opinion, and it's fascinating they're willing to rebel on this subject when they are so out of step. Look, I personally think, of course, there's a role for foreign aid, and clearly we've understood that for some time. It's been important as a country. We understand soft power, helping others. There's a relevance to that. But clearly, in the middle of a pandemic, when people are looking at, finances, they've got to work out what is most important when it comes to national, budgets, etc. Everyone's taken a hit in various ways, and it's quite right to say that for a brief period of time, we need to be looking, at events closer to home than further afield.
Yeah, well, exactly right. But I mean, do you think there will be a sort of a reckoning, if you like, by the government about exactly what they spend their foreign aid on, and whether it should be more accountable in some ways? Because I think the great British public look at some of the projects that we're financing and they think, what on earth are you doing? Why are you sending money to China, for example, to teach people how to grow rice?
Well, completely. I think you look at the nature of projects, you look at who's getting the benefit, who the beneficiary of this money, and you realise straight away that there's a big problem in terms of some of the criteria used. The other issue that relates into this is giving money to bilaterally as opposed to multilaterally. And we spend a lot of money, Mike, on organisations, international organisations, where we've got no clue where the money actually goes. Hundreds of millions here, hundreds of millions there. And we don't know how it's actually spent. Now, how does that help you with accountability?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to work that out.
And also, at the end of the day, Alan, it's our money. It's not their money. The government, unfortunately, especially if they're in for a long time, they fall under the misapprehension that they've got this budget to spend. But it's like, well, sorry, if you didn't have any tax revenue, if you didn't have any money coming from the great British public, you wouldn't actually have any to give away.
Well, like I said, there is a value in foreign aid. We're not going to say that it's a completely valueless proposition. But at a time of a pandemic, when public finances are stretched, this is taxpayers' money, and taxpayers want to see a return imminently on that. I think longer term, they all accept there is a value in this, or at least many people do, that it does make sense from a human point of view and from a national point of view to do this. But right now, the government is simply asking, let's just take a pause for a moment. We're still going to be one of the highest givers of foreign aid in the world, by the way, on 0.5%. It's temporary. Can we not look at this in a couple of years' time when finances recover?
And I think, again, a lot of people in this country think, well, why should that be a good thing? You know, why are we giving so much money compared to other nations of the world? And I've heard the argument made that other nations should stump up 0.5% or 0.7% in the same way that we do. But the one question I very rarely hear asked, Alan, I don't know whether you can answer it since you're not actually in government, is can you point to one individual benefit that we have had from giving any of this money to anyone?
Well, actually, I can do. I'm not in government. I can tell you what the benefit is. So if you are, for example, promoting peace and stability initiatives or prosperity initiatives in certain parts of the world where otherwise there would be chaos and disorder, what you are actually doing is preventing that chaos and disorder from overcoming the local areas, leading to refugee flows coming to guess where, Mike? Coming here.
Okay, so that's not a specific, but that's not a specific benefit. You're going to have to now tell me where that has worked.
Well, I can point to numerous chaos zones, whether it is in Europe or beyond, where we have put money. Now, can you say our contribution specifically was responsible for X, Y, and Z? No, but collectively, with the aid money going in there, you can see a benefit to that. You can see that by resolving issues locally in far-off places, it is much better to do that than to bring the problems to our doorsteps.
Well, maybe we should give a bunch of money to the Calais Ports Authority so that they can stop all these bleeding migrants coming over on dinghies.
Well, that is simply a law enforcement issue, and why the French are doing that, you'll have to ask the French.
But I mean, if you want to see cost-benefit analysis, and you're telling me that we're supposedly stopping chaos zones from exporting refugees, that's not what they're saying in Dover.
No, I agree with you, because look, our resourcing cannot solve global migration problems. You and I both know that. Okay, there's definitely no way that Britain on its own can resolve every problem in the world and make everyone rich. That's not how it's happening. But you asked for one specific benefit. I've given you one. I'm not suggesting it's a silver bullet.
Yeah, but it's not. But I'm not buying it though, Alan. You'll have to do better, is what I'm saying. We're the best one in the world. I'm not buying that we're stopping refugees from coming here, because we're not.
Okay, you don't have to buy it. The reality is, I would say more will come if you don't do this. If you say...
I disagree. I think more will come the more they realise... No, I would say this. I would say more will come, Alan, once they realise that when they get here, they can stay here forever. That's why they're coming.
Well, another good reason why we have to work on the immigration programme, why the government's reforms there are so desperately needed and long overdue. Because, as you say, part of this is a push and a pull factor. So it's quite clear that there are certain push factors from other places. But if we can reduce the pull factors, i.e. making Britain a much tougher place to get into, then yeah, that's going to have a reaction that way. And then maybe, Mike, you can go and say, right, we don't need to spend the foreign aid money anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the thing. I mean, most of the foreign aid money that I've seen, and I know that much of the sort of publicity that it gets is not always good for the government. You know, it's on sort of programs that seem pretty meaningless, arts projects, you know, like the rice thing in China. You know, it doesn't appear to be being spent on infrastructure of countries.
Full stop. We should not be giving money to any country with a space program, okay? We should not be giving money to any country with an advanced military. If you're really interested in helping the world's poorest people, and that in itself is a moral argument, and you may not like it, but you know it's one that exists, you should not be giving it to countries who are willfully spending money on things that should not be where lesser developed countries are. So in reality, part of this is a debate, as you just rightly pointed out, about where we are spending the money and on what sort of programming. One of the things I would like to see much more of it is, and in fact we've argued, is for a reapportionment, if you like, of spending into some of the diplomatic power that Britain has as well, to kind of affect change that way. So I would actually like to see better English-speaking facilities in other places like that, because again, you are integrating into the global economy that way. And I do think you are going to store up trouble. If everyone stopped giving foreign aid, you will really have a devil take the hindmost situation, chaos in much of the world, and you will see whatever you think is happening now with migration, you will see it multiplied as a result.
Yeah. And do you think there's any benefit in trade? Because sometimes that's an argument made by government officials that, the reason we give money to India and China is because it helps in trading deals that we might do over and above that. I'm not sure that's an argument either, really.
Well, the argument for, whether you're doing trade, look, that of course does then become an economic benefit for people here. If you're doing more trade, if you're doing, if that leads to economic development in the UK, then in a sense you're doing investment as opposed to aid, aren't you? So it's a slightly different argument in that process. But if we know that trade in general is a good thing, because you are both lending, you're giving money domestically with the growth of industries here, and also some at the other end as well. So clearly, trade is a benefit, full stop, and we should welcome it. Whether that's the kind of path of international aid is another matter, of course.
No, of course. Dr. Alan Mendoza, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Director of the Henry Jackson Society